related questions. Put your questions in the comments now so that I may answer your questions. Now, I want to go back to basics today, and that is how to get the green card without your spouse. Right? That is one of the areas that I focus on in my practice. I help clients who are in a tough situation here in the United States. You may be without status here and you're trying to figure out how you can obtain your status. And so, one of the ways is to get your green card without the spouse that may be mistreating you. That's probably one of the ways where you're stuck. You're stuck and you're unable to move forward in the permanent residence process, and you're trying to figure out how to get back on track. So let's talk about that. You have a US citizen or a legal permanent resident, spouse, or spouse. Now, there are other ways, by the way, to obtain your green card. Today, I'm just going to focus on the spouse. I think for the rest of the week, I'll focus on other ways. So, without your adult citizen child who may be mistreating you, without your parent who may have mistreated you. But today, let's focus on the spouse and what's required to do that. Now, let's address some of the concerns here. How can you move forward with this process without the spouse who is mistreating you? This is a very confidential process. And once you make up your mind and you do have everything lined up to qualify for it, it will remain confidential where your spouse, the spouse who's mistreating you, this could be a permanent resident spouse or a US citizen spouse. They will never know that you applied for this unless you tell them, which I highly encourage you not to do. Do not tell them that you're applying for this, because then that opens up the door for them to sabotage your process. But moving forward with this process, you're going to have to meet specific criteria. So, one is that you do have to show credible evidence that your spouse is mistreating you, either physically, but physical mistreatment is not required, mentally, uh, verbally, emotionally, and yes, even financially. Now, the next question that comes along is, well, I didn't save any, I don't have anything to prove that they're mistreating me. They never hit me. They never, I never called the police. So how can I show that this happened? Now, any credible evidence is going to be valuable here. That means that any credible evidence is going to be your um, statement, right? We call it declaration. Your statement is going to be essential. There's also other types of credible evidence, meaning believable evidence. Did you guys have a text back and forth where the spouse threatened you or called you names or gaslighted you? If that was the case, then that's your credible evidence right there. Yes, screenshots are acceptable here as a form of credible evidence. Screenshots of text messages, emails, that can be considered credible evidence. Um, Now, other types of evidence may be to if you've gone to therapy, or if you have a therapist who can provide an evaluation explaining why exactly what you went through is a form of mistreatment. Because sometimes you can't verbalize it, right? You know that what is being done to you it feels wrong. It makes you feel terrible inside. It hurts you to the core. And if your spouse is doing things intentionally against you to make you feel like this inside, it's a form of emotional abuse or mistreatment. And sometimes you can't verbalize it, but a therapist or a therapist who is trained in this particular area to spot these types of issues can easily put this in a professional report to explain why what you went through is a form of mistreatment. This can also be accepted as credible evidence. So, this is usually very valuable when we're talking about gaslighting, control, manipulation, jealousy. If they're intentionally vindictive against you, if they're constantly blackmailing you about maybe get out of my house or I'm going to send you home to your home country, then that means that you are being mistreated, and you can qualify for this, and the therapist can also lay this out. So we also use this form of evidence to show, to paint the picture for the officer to see that what you endured is abuse or extreme cruelty. Um, Other forms of evidence could be anything. For example, we have used things like a wiped out bank account to show that. Show financial abuse. The spouse kept on wiping out our client's bank account. That can show that financial abuse, or they were, had a history of gambling, and they kept on going into their shared account and pulling all their money. Or they are demanding money constantly, and stressing out our immigrant client. That can also be used as well. So it's anything. What I would say here is, if you're experiencing this kind of mistreatment and it just makes you feel wrong inside, it's time to explore whether you can apply for VAWA, whether you qualify. Of course, there are other qualifying criteria that you do have to meet. I'll go over those. For the marriage based process, you still do have to show that you entered your marriage to your spouse in good faith. So, for example, if you got with someone just for the immigration papers, it's illegal, by the way, to do that. You shouldn't be doing that. But you pay them a bunch of money and then they disappeared on you. That does not qualify you for VAWA because you did not enter the marriage in good faith. That is a sham marriage and it's illegal. So that does not count, right? This has to be a real marriage where you enter the marriage wanting to spend your life with this spouse. You wanted to wanted to plan your life. Maybe you wanted to start a family. Maybe you've already had a family. Maybe you already started a family. You started to put your assets together. You started to invest financially into your spouse. You started to purchase property. But even if you didn't purchase property, because you may be at the beginning of your marriage, maybe you started to put, you opened a bank account, or maybe you started your phone bill, your phone account together. You started to make moves to build a life together. That's considered a good faith marriage. And it means that you have met another criteria here to qualify for VAWA. So one is that you are experiencing mistreatment. If you feel terrible inside because they're doing things to make you feel bad, then you could very well qualify here. Then you look at the other one. Did you enter the marriage in good faith? Yes. Did you reside with your spouse at any point in your relationship? Not just during the qualifying relationship. So, yes, if you resided with your spouse, um, and you resided in at any point, it doesn't have to be after you're married. Right now they changed the policy manual to allow you to prove that you resided with your spouse at any point. And keep in mind, you could have lived with your spouse for a very short period of time. We've been approved for a few days, right, of living with your spouse. if you spent even a few days living with your spouse and then you had to leave because maybe things were just not working out with your spouse, you got separated, you started to experience the mistreatment and you had to separate, then that is still considered living together. If before the marriage, so you do have these situations where maybe before the marriage, you were living together and then you separated and then you got married, but maybe you never got a chance to move in together. That still qualifies here. And then you have to show the last one, which is you are a person of good moral character. Usually, if you've had a background, so say you've had an arrest, you've had an offense in the past, it does not mean that you don't qualify. But we would have to present evidence to show that you are now a person of good moral character, despite whatever happened in the past. If you've never had an arrest, then it's a matter of showing that you've had a clean record to be able to qualify for the VAWA. So we have to go through each element here. And one of the big mistakes that people make in this process is they apply on their own and they don't know how to address each legal requirement of VAWA. And so it turns into a messy, long, delayed process because you are not able to understand exactly what's required to provide it in the initial application. And the best thing you can do when you're applying for any type of application is to ensure that you're providing a solid, complete application as much as you can at the forefront of the application process to avoid any delays, any requests for evidence, and to move forward in your process. So now, should you're listening here and you totally relate to everything I'm saying. You are experiencing mistreatment, and but you may be in the middle of the process right now with that very same spouse, and you're trying to hang on there. You're trying to hang in there with this spouse to get to the end of the process, so um you can at least you know s- get your status here because you don't want to be stuck here. um should you still move forward with VAWA or hang tight with the marriage based process? And I would say this, usually if you really feel in your gut you need to do this on your own, you cannot depend on this spouse to get this for you, then you need to pursue VAWA, right? Because um, you see, if you go along with a process, with this marriage based process with a spouse that you do not trust, you know that they're doing things to sabotage you, then it means that you could face harsher issues in the past, in the future. They could go to your interview and sabotage your process. I've seen this. I know what I'm talking about. I'm very experienced here with VAWA, and I've seen this with my own eyes. Right, that this type of spouse usually will never want to see you get to the green card. They enjoy the process. They enjoy the whole process of watching you squirm, watching you beg, watching you fearful. And so they enjoy that whole marriage based process where they're leading you on, making you do things for them. They're forcing you to give them money. They're telling you what to do, telling you what to do. They're enjoying it. So they're definitely going along with the process. But then when it gets to producing paperwork to immigration, where they know now that you are reaching the end of your process, that's where things go south, right? That's where they stop producing evidence to immigration. That's where they start to say they're not going to go to the interview with you. That's where they go to the interview with you and they screw up the interview intentionally because they're not the ones that are going to face the consequences here. You are, right? You're going to face the consequences. They get to move on with their life, but you have to face a very complicated process where now you're being suspected, because the officer is not there to help you out. The officer isn't going to say, oh, your husband looks like he's mistreating you. The officer is there to determine marriage is real or not. And they just have to answer one of those two questions. They're not there to say, looks like in between, because looks real, but that spouse looks like they're mistreating them. They're not there to help you out in that way. They're just there to make the decision whether this marriage, based on the cooperation of the spouses, whether this marriage is real or not. And they will easily put down that this marriage does not look like it's real. And what that means is that your whole process becomes complicated, because the minute they say they don't believe your marriage is real, it means you are teetering right on the brink of being accused of marriage fraud. Sometimes they don't go that far, sometimes they do. So you don't want to risk that. If you do not trust your spouse to go through this process, don't, right? And they're mistreating you, don't go forward with it. The VAWA is there for that very reason. VAWA is there to allow you to go through this confidential process on your own without the spouse. And as I said before, the a lot of times people count themselves out because they figure that they don't qualify, they can't show it. And yes, you can. If you've been through it, you can show it. And we provide detailed declarations, a detailed, truthful declarations to the immigration service, letting them know what you're going through and why you deserve to obtain VAWA. So, that is my piece today on VAWA and doing it without the spouse. Now, let me just talk about the process, right? Now we've determined you qualify. We've gone through the requirements here. We see that you qualify. Then the next step is we're going to go ahead and file. If you're married to a U.S. citizen, then we're going to file for your adjustment of status application, the petition, work permit, and your travel document. You do not need to have an affidavit of support for this process, meaning you don't have to show that you make a certain amount of income to move forward in the process. If you're married to a permanent resident, used to be great because there was not a wait list before, but now so many people have applied based on having a permanent resident spouse in the marriage-based process that it is now there is a wait list for spouses of permanent residents. But the wait list right now, it's not too long. If they're processing those who submitted their applications on September 1st. I have to check the National Visa Bulletin for next month. But the last I checked, it was September 1st, meaning you may have a couple of months of a wait time. The other benefit here is that you get to stay in the United States for this whole process. So even if you have a permanent resident spouse, even if you have a U.S. citizen spouse, even if you enter the country without permission, you're able to move forward with this process. And hear this, even if you have a permanent bar in some circumstances. Now, when we talk about a permanent bar, it's if you enter the country without permission and you stayed, entered the country without permission, then left the country and then returned, then then you could look at a permanent bar. Also, the other one is if you got deported, then you came without inspection, cross the border, then you have a permanent bar. But you can get that permanent bar forgiven if that on that entry, that last entry is in some way related to the mistreatment by your spouse. So maybe your spouse forced you to do this. Maybe your spouse blackmailed you, and so you felt compelled to have to sneak back into the country to get back to this abusive spouse. So these things do happen. So if that's the case, you could very well be forgiven for even any kind of unlawful entry into the country. But we'd have to do a detailed evaluation in the consultation to determine whether you qualify and move forward. this is where you need to schedule your consultation to make sure that you we can determine whether you qualify here. Now, I do want to let you know also that as the weeks go by, I would say this, my schedule is filling up. And so I really would like to help as many individuals get their status as possible. And what I look at is I look at different ways that individuals can gain status or relief here, get their work permit here. Um, Even if you've overstayed. And so for the rest of the year, we are now going to from Thanksgiving into the Christmas holidays. We're going to be doing a lot of different activities during the live shows to give out free consultations. So stay engaged. Make sure when we announce it. So I'm going to announce this formally, but I'm telling you all beforehand because I'm so excited. We're going to give out some free consultations, and we're also going to be giving out discounts throughout the Thanksgiving and the Christmas holidays because I want to make sure that the service is accessible to certain individuals and that I can help as many people as possible because the year is going by. We don't know how the policies can change, and I want to help as many people as I can um, to move forward. Now, what are the benefits of VAWA here, right? The benefits of VAWA is that you do obtain your 5-year work permit while you wait for the entire process to go through. It's confidential, so you don't have to do it with you don't have to do it with your spouse involved. Spouse doesn't have to sign. Spouse doesn't have to give you any kind of they will not contact the spouse. As a matter of fact, it's against the law for the immigration service to contact anybody about this process. It is confidential. Usually when my clients and I are applying, it's between my client and I, and it is no one else is involved in this process. Um, so right now they're giving out 5-year work permits while you wait for the entire process to go through, and then you will get your green card while staying in the United States. So it doesn't require you to leave the country or do anything outside of the country. The process enables you to stay here for the entire process. So it has changed the lives of many of my clients, and I urge you to do, I know it may be an intimidating process, but just know that we are there for our clients. We offer comprehensive representation, so we don't do um a, file and go kind of thing. We are a law firm, and I represent my clients from beginning to end. I see my clients through to the end of the process. So you will always be able to find me, always be able to speak with me about your process moving forward. And that's the best way because although I've heard so many nightmare scenarios where people hire sometimes not even lawyers to file their papers. They file the papers and then they file something that's wrong and they can't find them to help them even corroborate what they put in the application. So, lesson here is don't go with non-lawyers, and then think about the quality of representation you're getting when you are seeking an attorney. It's about the investment and quality when you're moving forward in the process, and that's what we focus here at the law firm is quality over quantity or anything like that. We focus on quality here and make sure our clients are good through the process. All right, so I've said my piece. I am looking forward to your questions. I really love to answer your questions. So let me go ahead. I'm going to scroll through and answer questions. So start typing those questions in the comments so I can get to them as quickly as possible. Okay. Can arriving aliens with final removal order but paroled by ICE under 212D adjust status via USCIS? So, this is a very complex question. It may be possible. If you have a final removal order, it might be a matter of revisiting that removal order to get it terminated, or if the removal order has been, it's way in the past, so say it's like 20 years in the past, it may be a non-issue and you'd be able to use that parole to then adjust status. But we have to understand the circumstances here. What is the reason for the removal? Because some removals are on the basis of maybe a permanent inadmissibility, and so we have to be careful to understand your issue here because it is very complex. And this is where you should not be trying to figure this out on your own. You need to call, schedule an appointment. Let's get specific facts here and then get to work. I'm watching you. Oh, you're welcome, Money. And feel free to ask your questions here, but keep in mind that this is not legal, personalized legal advice, it's general information. All right, here. So I'm answering here on Instagram. So I'm going to go from platform to platform. I'm on Instagram. I'm on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch and TikTok. Put your questions in the comments, and I'm just going to make my way around to answer as many questions as I can get to. My work has started, but my spouse doesn't want to continue the process. How do I go about this? Give us a call. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about why your spouse doesn't want to move forward with the process. Usually, that's not a good sign. That's a red flag for mistreatment in the marriage. So, that's going to be your first bet here. And then I can advise you on what to do. How long does your I-130 process take if you are married to an LPR? So if you're outside of the US, you're looking at about 2 years outside of the US, 2.5 years. It might be a little longer now with a wait list in place again. And this is where apply as soon as possible. Don't wait because it's only going to get longer. So if you have a permanent resident spouse, um, apply. But if you're in the US, get legal advice because it's going to be a different process for you unless you apply for VAWA. If you're outside of the US, apply ASAP because it that wait list for spouses of permanent residents is only going to get longer. Now, if your spouse upgrades to a US citizen from a permanent resident, you will upgrade your process as well, and it may move faster. All right, put those questions in the comments. Right now, I'm looking at questions on Instagram. So put those questions in the comments and I will answer your questions. How many COVID vaccines are required? One or two. So as long as you can show that you've gotten an acceptable COVID vaccine, that's fine. So like you have different vaccines that just need one. I think like the J&J Johnson's vaccine is just one. I don't even know if that's a thing anymore. And then the others require two. So it depends on which one you choose, but you can choose any one you want to choose. Hi there. Good morning, TT. I have a spouse interview this week. What can I bring? So good luck. Make sure that you and your spouse prepare, consult with your attorney. Now, keep in mind, your attorney knows your case best. I don't know your case, so I can't tell you what specifically to bring because remember, not all cases are one size fits all situation. But what I can say here is make sure that you bring copies of your application. Make sure you bring additional evidence to show bona fides of the marriage. Make sure you bring original documents like your original marriage certificate, original birth certificate, your original passport. If you have your passport with entry stamps that what you came into the country with, bring that. Make sure you bring an album with pictures to show updated pictures of your marriage. And updated evidence could be your filed tax returns. It could be your file tax returns. It could be your joint bank account, your joint lease if you started a lease later, if you moved, all of that. So just make sure you gather all the evidence of your bona fides and bring your original documents. Bring copies of your application in case they have any questions about what you submitted in your application, and you want to take a look at it yourself, or you need to maybe they said they didn't receive something. You can take it out of your folder and give it to the officer right then and there. So no, this does not. So any promotions does not apply to past any past consultations or anybody who signed on earlier. This is going to be announced formally, and it will have a start date. Uh, all right. Okay. If All right. Do you do J1 waivers for 2-year rule, and how long is the process? So yes, I do those, and you could expect anywhere from 9 months to over a year for those waivers right now. I have a job offer that is willing to sponsor me, but I'm on an L1 visa and I've already overstayed the days of leaving the country. What is the way out of this? Can I do it here in the US? So, if you, it depends on how long you've overstayed. There are exceptions for employment base. If you've not reached the 180th day of overstaying, then it still may be possible to complete the process without even the need to leave the country. If you worked without a permit, then that could also be a problem. There may be forgiveness there if you've worked under a certain amount of time under the adjustment of status provision. But these are questions that you definitely have to consult with an attorney on. So schedule an appointment. Let's talk about it. How long is the process? Should I open a bank account with my spouse after marriage or before marriage? Anyone works. The sooner the better. It doesn't hurt to have. No, keep in mind, this is where it's very important to make sure you have representation, because these are the types of questions that your attorney is going to guide you with. Now, is it advisable to open up a bank account with your spouse? Sure. I mean, I don't usually it's not a problem, but if you're concerned about something that may affect your immigration process, that's where you need to have representation and ask those questions. Should I bring my phone to the interview? Now, I am not your attorney. I wouldn't be able to tell you specific advice, but usually when I go, we take our phones, but we turn it, at least my clients have to turn it off during the interview, because the officers do get very, very upset if that phone goes off in the interview. And oftentimes you will see turn off your phones, no phones allowed. So just make sure that your phone is off when you go into that interview. All right. Can I get married after VAWA is approved before I-485 is yes. So I've once now keep in mind I'm not your attorney, and you should always get personalized legal advice, because I don't know what your situation is and I don't know if it's even advisable. Is it advisable for you to get married right after your VAWA has been approved? These are things you should run by your attorney, and this is where representation is going to be key. Now, generally speaking, marriage is allowed after the vow is approved, even before the adjustment of status to get the green card is approved. But is it advisable? This is what I always say. Is it advisable? What are the facts? Who is this new spouse that you're going to remarry? All right, so now I'm here on TikTok. Let's answer some questions. How long USCIS take to respond to I-693 RFE? Been over 2 months. I-360 approved. So it ranges and it depends on your case. It depends on the service center, how backed up they are. I've seen it in as little as 4 weeks, but I've seen it as long as a year, because usually if they're responding to they are now, they've gotten the RFE with the medical, and now they maybe want to just issue the green card. They'll just issue the green card, and it might take that long for them to process it. I got my work permit in 2021. What reason would be to not get a response already? So many things. It just depends. Sometimes they're doing an extra background check. Sometimes there's things missing in the application that causes them to for the application to go through extra processing. Sometimes there's a underlying issue that they are looking into, or they're thinking about how to address it. Sometimes it's just backlog. So it just depends. Uh, my fiance, my fiance is undocumented but works and pays taxes. Does he still need a letter of affidavit of support? Absolutely. No, you cannot petition for your fiance. You have to petition for your spouse. Um, you I am a little here. You can only petition for your spouse, not your fiance. So if your spouse is here, if once you get married, you will need to provide an affidavit of support in the application. The affidavit of support is the document that says that you as the spouse or the petitioner will support your relative or spouse, as long as for 10 years or as until they become a citizen. If your mom files for you while in the US, can you get a work permit? If your mom files the I-130 petition but does not file the adjustment of status application, then you will not get a work permit. If you and you can only apply for the I-485 if you qualify for it. So this is where you need to make sure you get legal advice. You're giving a lot of good information. Yes, I do try to make sure I am as detailed as possible. This is why join me throughout the next month as I'm going through my lives. I will be making announcements in my lives for consultations, for free consultations, for discounts, special discounts. But you're gonna have to also be involved in the process. So I'm really excited about it, and I'm going to formally make an announcement on the start date of that. So look out for that, but it's coming. Uh, how effective is the out of normal processing time inquiry? So how effective? Sometimes it can get to the point where you do have to take additional steps, because it can be a process that's shielded in not a lot of transparency. For example, sometimes you will get a response saying that they're just going through extra background checks, and that's that. So sometimes it takes a little nudge in other ways, like contacting a congressperson or even going through and filing a mandamus. So it can sometimes it's not very effective, but it's a start. And oftentimes the congressperson and the ombudsman will not move further in the process unless you can show that you've at least done an inquiry into your process. And then sometimes it can reveal a mistake in your process that can be corrected. How long are work authorizations taking right now? It just depends on the process. Family based, employment based, 3 to 6. humanitarian base. So VAWA, for example, is taking 8 to 12 months. And then you have other types, for example, like the T status, it's taking about a year to get it. The U visa, when you're waiting for deferred action, can take anywhere from a year and a half to 2 years to get it. So it just depends on in what way are you applying for work permits, because it's just not one process. What happens if I overstay on my visitor's visa? So it will get very uncomfortable. So if you overstay, you will have to. If you don't have a plan, you don't have a way to gain legal status here. It gets to be a very uncomfortable process. And this is where I see a lot of people they're taken advantage of. They have a hard time finding good paying jobs. And so I would say this, don't you need legal advice here before you think to do anything like that. And sometimes you don't have to just make a decision to overstay. There are options there, but you have to explore it. And this is where you need to invest in yourself. Invest to figure out the legal right way to do this so that you don't end up in this uncomfortable situation. I do assist clients who end up maybe overstaying, but it doesn't mean that I am encouraging people to overstay. I am trying to help people who are in a very terrible situation get out of it. And so that's the difference here. I'm trying to help them to get out of it. I'm not encouraging anybody to overstay because for example, many of my clients turn out to be victims of labor trafficking because they end up being lured here, or they're here and they end up in a position where they're being mistreated by an employer, um, mistreated because of the fact that they're at a disadvantage without their immigration status here. So, make sure you get the guidance before you jump and overstay. Okay, so I can't afford a lawyer for VAWA. What do I do? I'm stuck and can't work. So, in this case, there are resources available. So you do have, for example, pro bono attorneys who offer services. They don't charge, but they can assist you through it. Now, some of these services they are overwhelmed themselves. Sometimes it can take a very long time for them to get to you because they're so overwhelmed. And then sometimes they remain within the cookie cutter type of our cases where maybe they only take cases where the police reports are involved. And so you find that they may tell you you don't qualify. But if you can't afford quality, the quality services where an attorney can provide you the services very quickly, then the next thing would be it's at least worth it to see if you can get a low bono or pro bono attorney. That means, and usually, for example, like the Catholic charities offer services like this, so you can do a search online, and if you find these entities, these charitable organizations, they may be able to assist you. So I'd say if you're in a desperate situation like this, still go ahead and do that at least because it's worth it. Remember, this is life changing, right? It's life changing. It's going, but sometimes to get to life changing solutions, you have to make the investment. You have to make the investment in time, sometimes financially, and so don't just sit there and do nothing. see if you can find a pro bono attorney who can assist you at least. Um, I already have an I-797C. What is the next step for T visa? How long can I get my biometrics? So biometrics, I'm noticing they're all over the place right now. For example, we just got an approval, and we got an approval a month after the biometrics. But the biometrics took place 8 months after we applied. Before it was 2 months. So I'm assuming here that the biometrics took place in the last at the last few months of the process rather than at the beginning. What can cause for the USCIS not to update status after response to RFE over 13 months? Sometimes when it reaches the service center, they just don't they don't update it. It's just something I noticed. Is it safe to travel back home if you got green card through the T visa? So I would say, for the most part, yes, after you've gotten your green card, but it's a question of on a case by case basis, because when you're applying for the T visa, you do have to show that you will experience extreme hardship if you go back to your country. And it depends, what did you present to the immigration that is an extreme hardship? And could that in some way then raise questions about the validity of your T visa application and the truthfulness of it if you end up going back? So, this is where it's very important to make sure that you are guided by an attorney who can tell you about the risk, right, associated with going back home, with even with your green card. Is T status process confidential from the trafficker? Absolutely. Yes, it is. And I can say that with confidence. So, for example, I've had clients who have lived in the same location with the trafficker, and their only means of escaping the trafficker is by getting the work permit. And we're able to get the status for our clients even while they were living with the trafficker so that they could escape the situation. And the trafficker did not have an inkling that they were doing this. So we are very careful about communications with our clients, and so is the USCIS. They're very careful. For example, the USCIS communicates with us, and then we talk to our clients in a safe forum. So it's very confidential, and we make sure that we reinforce that with throughout every step of the way. What if I took voluntary deportation, so voluntary departure to my home country and want to return? What can be done? So, voluntary departure usually means that it's not considered deportation. So you'll not have a deportation on your record. Whether you have other inadmissibilities is going to depend on the facts here. So it means that you could very well come back before come back, but it depends on how you qualify. Um, what is the timeline for AOS from T visa to green card? So it can be anywhere from a year and a half to 2 years. Now, if you're applying after 3 years, then you're looking at about a year and a half. Hello, Ms. Tharpe. Hi there, Lindy. Since you're in Florida and your client is in Texas, where will the interview be? Do you come to all interviews? So, good question. It's always going to be, the interview is always going to be where my client is. And in cases where I go to the interview, it depends, right? If my client wants me to be there, or if I believe it's essential for me to be there, then we definitely make arrangements to be present for the interview. So, is there a way to get the work permit if you're out of status for years? Can you qualify if you're a victim of robbery a few years back and also a victim of? Absolutely, Jill. Yes, absolutely. I do this every day for my clients, right? So here it appears as if there are two possibilities: the U status through the deferred action while you're applying for the U status, and then also the T status. So I see this with my eyes because I do get these results for my clients. So um, I have gotten this for my client who was here as far back as 1996. So yes, it is possible, no doubt. Give me a call and let's talk about your situation. Can you get a work permit and out of status for years? Okay, so I answered that. Now, keep in mind, I represent clients in all 50 states and around the globe. So no matter where you are, I can help you. Can I get citizenship from my business that I have in the US or a green card holder? Uh, can you get citizenship from the business? No. Can you get permanent residence? Maybe, depends though on what kind of business do you have, and do you qualify for something like exceptional ability green card, extraordinary ability green card, EB5, that's the investor's visa, or do you qualify through the national interest waiver through your business? So, but it's going to depend on a lot of facts here, and this is where it's very important to schedule the consultation. If you're undocumented with a social, can you work illegally and pay tax on that social? Yes, you can pay taxes even if you're not working legally. Had my interview since June, haven't heard anything since. That's not usually a good sign. Sometimes that's an indication that they're looking further into your background. Maybe they have additional questions or suspicions. I don't know what happened in your interview. I don't know what type of interview it is. But usually, with a good case, we get results the day after or within a week of the interview. What happened if I overstay on my visitor visa? So I think I answered that. You'll be very uncomfortable and you'll become an undocumented immigrant, which means that you'll have just very limited options to get the green card or any kind of status. All right. So that's going to be it for me today. I have to move on to the other appointments. But as I said, please go ahead, keep track because we're going to be doing a lot of giving between in November here and then December. So keep track. But by all means, give us a call right now if you need assistance and you want legal advice. Go ahead, give us a call. And then we'll be also helping those of you who maybe want discounts to schedule a consultation to get those during the Christmas season, Thanksgiving season, and Christmas season. So I'll make an announcement, an official announcement in the live of when that's going to be kicked off, and then we will start handing those out. So look out for those. Thanks so much for your time today. Thank you for all your questions. These are such excellent questions, and I'm so glad I can share this information with you and share in the learning. So thanks, everyone. Have a good day. Bye-bye.